Indonesia is still grappling with problems in the employment sector. Today's Talking Point segment with Harisman will talk with Director General of International Labour Organization over ILO's view on the matter. Stay with us.
Thank you, Dita. Good evening. Now we have Mr. Ryder from the International Labour Organization today with us, and we are going to talk about the labour and the employment sector. Good evening, Mr. Ryder.
Good evening.
Thank you for being here. Welcome to Indonesia. This is your first visit, right, as the Director General?
Yes, that's right. It's the first time in the job that I now hold that I've been in Indonesia, but I've been here in the past.
Yeah.
The first time I came here was 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
So it's really interesting to see the enormous changes that have occurred here. And I have to say, in the field of labour, I think many of the successes and the progress that your country has accomplished.
Yeah, so it's great for us. Well, now Indonesia is now a middle-income country. Yes. So what is your view on how the country can improve its economy, which in turn can create more employment in globalized world like today?
Yes, you're right. Because of these successes of the last 20 years or so, as you say, Indonesia has now become a middle-income country. And that brings new challenges, I think. I think Indonesia, as you said, in a very competitive global economy with the ASEAN community just around the corner, I think has to really look very carefully at what constraints it must face to further progress. And I can see two or three things where I think Indonesia needs to concentrate.
Yeah.
One, I think, is on skills and training. You know, more and more economic success will come from the possession of skills and knowledge in production processes. And I think Indonesia could be well advised to invest in that. A second area, I think, and I know that the government is looking at this, is infrastructure. I think that every successful economy needs to have the right infrastructure, be it roads, port facilities, electricity and power, to enable the economy to move forward. And the last point, and we were just talking about it, I think investors always look for safe conditions. They want certainty, they need predictability around regulations, and above all, they need to make sure that corruption is not a problem. So I think this is also an area that needs to be given priority.
Yeah, so do you think that the condition in Indonesia for employment sector is quite safe? What do you think?
Well, I think Indonesia has a lot of positive things to show. You've been growing quite quickly.
Yeah.
I think Indonesia, after the disruption of the financial crisis, is doing pretty well. Unemployment is down to around 6%. So I think there is a lot which I think you can be optimistic about.
Oh, okay.
And yet there are still difficulties. There are still problems. I think we've seen the demonstrations in Jakarta today. I arrived just in time to see them. I think that's a reflection of the fact that there are still problems out there.
Yeah.
Problems about pay, problems about the quality of employment.
Yeah.
And these need to be tackled.
You've mentioned about the Asian Economic Community in the upcoming year, next year.
Yes.
So what do you think that Indonesia should prepare so that this country can maintain its competitiveness, particularly in its employment sector?
Yeah. I think everybody believes that the ASEAN community is going to be a generator of more jobs, and a lot more jobs. But the question is, will Indonesia be successful in turning that potential into reality? And that's what I talked about already. You need to look at training, skills, infrastructure, all of these things that will equip Indonesia to be a success. Of course, when we talk about competitiveness, people always look about wages.
Yeah.
But I think we have to be very careful. Wages are only one part of the equation. You know, countries do not generally succeed because they pay low wages, and they don't compete better by bringing wages down.
I see.
I think the other side of the equation is productivity. How to make workers more productive, and when you're more productive, well, you can pay higher wages, and that's what everybody wants in the end. Higher wages for a better life.
Yeah. Do you find this the minimum wage issue is similar to other countries? What?
Yeah, you know, one thing is striking coming into Indonesia, just how important this debate on the minimum wage is. I would even say it's too important. From what I understand, every year you come to a moment when it's time to decide the minimum wage, and very often this process is undertaken with demonstrations, with people in the streets.
Yeah, this is taking place here.
Which we've seen today. And let me say, and we saw it on your report, watching the demonstration in Jakarta today, I have to say it was very orderly, so far as I could see. People behaved in a very peaceful way. The police also behaved very well. So there's nothing wrong with demonstrations. I don't criticize it, not at all. And yet, I think there is advantage in developing other mechanisms of dialogue, of people coming together and discussing the issues, so that you don't have to settle the issue in the street. You can settle it through other methods.
Yeah, the informal economy in this country is more than 60%. What do you think, in your view, how can we move towards the formal sector with better condition and better protection? Can you share some experience with this kind of dealing with this
indeed. In fact, Indonesia is doing quite well in bringing the figures of informality down. We put the figure at 53%. You were at 60% a couple of years ago. So clearly Indonesia is already doing some good things. And I think there are a number of things that need to be done. One, I think, is the whole process of moving people into high productivity manufacturing employment, which tends to be formalized. Informality you find, I think, in the rural sector, in low productivity areas. I think you have to encourage enterprises to be formal by not making administration too complex, not crowding them out. You also need enforcement to make sure that companies are obeying the law, obeying the rules. And I think that governments, workers and employers will benefit from a process of formalization. But I do think that Indonesia is on the right road.
Yeah, Indonesia just released the roadmap on the elimination of child labor. What do you think about it?
From what I understand from the roadmap, the idea is to eliminate child labor completely by 2022. And I think that's great. I think Indonesia needs to be congratulated on that. Let me say that the ILO first started working with Indonesia on child labor issues about 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
And at that time, people weren't very ready to recognize the problem. Today, and I want to congratulate Indonesia for it, you've recognized the problem, you've set the ambition of elimination. Indonesia has already reduced child labor. You're down to 1.5 million. That's 1.5 million too many, but it does constitute big progress. You're on a good road. Congratulations.
So how is the positions of Indonesia as a middle income country affecting collaborations with ILO and its constituent at the country level?
Well, I think the answer is that as Indonesia changes, so the ILO's cooperation with Indonesia has to change as well. Today Indonesia has a lot of capacities, has a lot of things it can do on its own. I think the role of the ILO, and by the way, we have a portfolio of cooperation projects worth $20 million in Indonesia, so we're quite present. But I think more and more the demand in Indonesia is for policy advice, for sharing of knowledge. We have experience from many countries. We can put that knowledge at the disposal of Indonesia, which will make up its own minds what to do with it, and also building capacities, helping Indonesia in government, in employer communities and in trade unions to develop their own capacity, to develop their own policies and to implement them. And that's what we're doing, and that's really what my visit is about this week.
Okay. In relations to commemorations of the Human Rights Day, how does the ILO ensure the rights of migrant workers, particularly with the growing trends of borderless country?
Yes, you're absolutely right to point to the importance of protecting the rights of migrant workers. And I know that Indonesia gives great importance to this issue. You know, there are over 230 million workers, migrant workers in the world. Many of them, I think, work in conditions which are not fair, which can be exploitative. Migrant workers can be very vulnerable. And what we need to do, and the ILO is trying to do that, is to put the rights of migrant workers at the centre of the policy debate. We have a saying in the ILO, labour is not a commodity.